Welcome to Fourth and Frames. I'm Chris Battistell with my co-hosts Rhett Manuel and Drew Scott. Tonight, we will be breaking down our Bussin, Disgussin, and mid players, pitting 2018 Mahomes versus 2019 Lamar Jackson, Devin Achane versus David Montgomery, and Rhett and Drew get into a flex off. We discuss our panic buttons and ring the alarm. And, boys, let's get it popping. Welcome, everyone, to the show. If you got a question for us, drop it in the chat, and we will answer it live on the air. Fellas, Week 8 is officially in the books. Week 9 is here. Hello, Albert. Welcome to the show. Are you guys geared up? Are you making pushes for the playoffs? What is your midseason strategy like for the teams that you have that are competing?
I'll go ahead and take this first, because for me right now, the midseason strategy with teams that I have that are doing really well is to don't break what doesn't need fixing or anything. Just roll the ship as always. If you have good injury fortune at this point, that's probably part of the reason why you have such a good record by this point in the season, because you managed to avoid those injuries. But you always got to be aware. So I always like to make sure there's a little bit of depth behind me just in case something happens. Yeah. But by and large, if something is going well, you don't take it whether you roll what you got, and it's worked for me so far.
Yeah, so Rhett and I are a little bit different then, because I'm absolutely the league that I'm the redraft league that I'm really competing in. I'm looking to do anything I possibly can. If there's a team that's kind of on the fringe and they've got a player that I like that still has a bye week coming up, I'll try to go buy them like on their bye week and send them back a guy that I might have like a tier down. I'm starting to look at fantasy playoffs, and if I've got guys in similar tiers and one guy has a better 3-week stretch during the fantasy playoffs compared to the other, I'll look at those guys and try to attack some, get set up for the fantasy playoffs. Now is where I'm really kind of trying to get myself ready for the fantasy playoffs. Now, as far as like the Scott Fish Bowl, stuff like that, we won't really talk about that. I don't have anything good to say there. I've basically gotten out of the way, and I'm still setting my lineup, but I'm kind of stayed away from the waiver wire, hoping that instead of me picking up people, somebody in my division will pick them up and they'll go win the whole thing. So at least I could say that, somebody from my division won the Scott Fish Bowl and I didn't get in their way, because my hopes are pretty much shot in that. But and then in the couple dynasty leagues I'm in, I'm going full tank mode in those. So I'm trying to just secure the best draft pick I can, and so that's just constant moves and trading and stuff like that. So this is a really busy time of the year for me.
Active. Yeah, active. For the teams that I have that are competing, same kind of borrow strategy from both you guys, try to attack some depth just in case of injuries, but I also like to try to go trade for high valued players on teams that aren't really doing so well, or teams that are maybe lacking depth, and I can move 2 pieces for that upper tier player to bolster my lineup and secure my run at a playoff bye, because that playoff bye, if your league has them, is important. Playing those 2 weeks in the playoffs, getting away from that 1 week where who knows? I mean, you see it all the time. Some of these teams just have these explosive weeks with Kyron Williams and Devin Achane and all these big fantasy players going off on a weekly basis. Who knows what's going to happen? So if you can limit your potential for elimination in the fantasy playoffs, that's where you ultimately want to get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's not to say that I didn't do some tinkering, because as you guys both know, a month ago in a dynasty league, I was sitting there and I felt like I had a chance and I just needed one more guy. So I actually ended up trading Michael Pittman, George Pickens, and a first-round pick, and got back Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, and Adam Thielen. So that actually ended up was the thing that kind of put me over the top in that situation. So at that point, I was like, I did the tinkering there. Currently in that league, I'm 7-1, top in points. So it's just one of those things where it's like I did my tinkering a month ago, and so now I'm just like, all right, we're gonna let that ride now, because you don't want to mess it up.
Yeah. You kind of want to beat the trade deadline as well. You want to get in there. If your league does have trade deadlines, you want to get in there a week or two before, because some of the prices for players can vary and you can get caught. You can get caught tripped up if you're chasing the points instead of the guy that does trade a week or two ahead. You can get caught trying to either overpaying on trade deadline. Hello, Bob Harris. Big news tomorrow. Our one and only Rhett is going to be with Bob Harris tomorrow on the SiriusXM Fantasy Show.
You love to see it, man.
After the Thursday night football game. So make sure you tune in for that. That's going to be electric. It's a good time on there. So Rhett, I'm excited for you to hop on that. I will be listening, and I hope you will be listening too. But to everyone that is listening right now, head over to www.fantasyinframes.com to find all of our rankings, weekly articles, waiver ads, start sits for both IDP and just regular offensive fantasy football. We got shows across the board. Dynasty 365, which was on just before us for Dynasty content. Us at Fourth and Frames giving you weekly redraft content. Shoot the Gap for all your IDP content. We got shorts and all different kinds of videos on the Fourth and Frames YouTube channel. We got the mailbag show. We got the waiver show on Tuesdays with Gator and Kyle and Zach on the mailbag show. We got the Sunday live show from 9 to 12. Everybody at Fantasy Frames hopping into that, getting you ready for the week. Everything you need to succeed for the fantasy football season is right here at Fantasy and Frame. So make sure you're checking all that stuff out. The waiver wire show every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The mailbag show Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right before Thursday night football game. And again, the Fantasy and Frames pregame show every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Now let's get into news and all right, guys, big injury news, probably the biggest one of the week. Kirk Cousins down with the Achilles tear, done for the season. They did trade for Arizona Cardinal journeyman quarterback Josh Dobbs. So he's looking to be the QB1 there. I don't know if he's starting this week. I think they said Jaron Hall was going to start this week. So Josh Dobbs probably for the future. Offense takes a hit a bit, obviously, with Dobbs.
Yeah, I think probably the only guy that you're going to see probably not take as big of a hit in the passing game is probably going to be TJ Hawkinson because, there's a very strong chance. I'm not going to say a very strong chance, but there's the possibility at this point now that we might see Justin Jefferson shut it down for the season. We'll see where that goes. But, Jordan Addison takes a bit of a hit. KJ Osborne was never much of a thing there. Alexander Sadison and Cam Akers are kind of zeros in that situation. So really the guy who you might only see hold steady, in my opinion, is going to be Hawkinson because of that tight end spot. That safety net is vital for guys who aren't especially effective in all aspects of the game. So if you can get Hawkinson, he's probably the safest guy in the Minnesota offense at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw him lead on Trey McBride this past week. His last start in Arizona, where it was wild because right after the game, it was like, yeah, Josh Dobbs is our guy, and then their coach came out. Well, I went back and watched the film.
He's not our guy.
Josh Dobbs. It's like, no, there's something else going on because there's no way you watched the film and decided, yeah, we need to move on from Dobbs. So I'm glad he got another shot. It's wild to see like the trajectory he's been on has been insane, but I'm glad he played himself into another role. But I want to know, I've heard two nicknames for Alexander Madison that I like a lot now. So is Alexander Sadison or Alexander Middison? Which one we gonna roll with? Because you guys have both, Chris brought the mid in, Rhett's brought the sad in. They're both really strong nicknames.
I stole sad from the fantasy footballer. So, I mean, we got to give them credit where it's due on that because I'd heard it and I was like, man, that's
creative
funny.
geniuses.
So,
yeah,
those guys are good.
That's a good group to steal something from.
All right, let's keep it rolling with the injuries. It's a long list. James Conner, Jonathan Gannon said he was ready to go. He's excited to get back on the field. So some good news on the injury front there. Wide receiver Michael Wilson for the Cardinals did not practice Wednesday with a shoulder injury, as well as Emery DeMarcado. He was a non-participant with a toe injury. Kyler Murray, full participant in practice. Gannon did say it was either going to be Tune or Murray this week at quarterback for the Falcons. No real big injury news. Drake London didn't practice Wednesday, but again, the Wednesday practices, if they do miss it, is nothing that you have to really worry too much about. If Drake London misses Thursday, misses Friday, then it's most likely he's not playing Sunday. So make sure you keep an eye on that.
Yep.
Odell Beckham Jr. didn't practice Wednesday with the shoulder injury. Gus Edwards didn't practice as well with the toe injury. Nothing to be really that worried about. Gus Edwards did come out today and say he's ready to carry the full load for the Baltimore Ravens. Josh Allen was a non-participant. He did say if he had to play today that he would be ready to go. So again, nothing that you really have to worry about on that front. For the Buffalo Bills. For the Carolina Panthers, nothing real here to report. DJ Shark didn't practice, but DJ Shark is more bust than boom at this point. Justin Fields, again, another DNP for him. Not looking like he's starting this upcoming week against the New Orleans Saints. Joe Mixon was a limited participant. He should be good to go for Sunday. Jerome Ford, limited participant. He should be good to go for Sunday. David Njoku was a non-participant at practice with an ankle injury. Michael Gallup didn't participate. That's just due to an illness. Denver Broncos were pretty much clean across the board. Same with the Detroit Lions. The Green Bay Packers, again, same thing, pretty much clean across the board. Dameon Pierce did miss practice today with an ankle injury. That's an interesting situation to monitor there, that Houston Texans backfield. I know my guy Drew here was pretty big on Dameon Pierce being a bust coming into the season. Caught some heat for it, but turns out 8 weeks in has been pretty much on point with the situation there. And one of the bigger talking points that you made, Drew, was that the guy that he had behind him in Devin Singletary, and that he never had a running back like Devin Singletary behind him, and that eventually Devin Singletary was going to eat into some of that workload. And that's been evident over the past couple weeks in that backfield for the I'm drawing a blank here. Houston Texans. Reading too many names right now with all these injuries. I was talking to I was talking to Drew and Rhett before the show. I was like, man, it would be a lot easier to name the guys that weren't injured in the NFL than to name the guys that didn't practice this week. Of course, Vikings. The Cousins injury is devastating. If there's a QB that you guys had to pivot to that might be on the waivers in a 1 QB league, if you have Kirk Cousins, quickly, Rhett, who you going with?
We'll talk about it later.
Okay, Drew.
I'd go double check. I mean, the news has been going around long enough, but I'd go double check and see if Kyler Murray's still out there in waivers. He's not going to be back this week. Maybe he won't be back this week. They're still up in the air, but if not this week, then I think next week. So you might still have to get a spot start for this week, but go stash Kyler, especially if you have an IR spot in your league.
Yeah, definitely. Michael Thomas for the New Orleans Saints did not practice due to illness. He was sick versus the Indianapolis Colts as well, so he did play with that illness. So not real much of a big issue there. Barkley was limited. Darren Waller said today that the hamstring may sideline him for a week, which is not a good sign. So he's at this point. If you have Darren Waller, it's tough to see, Rhett, but soft tissue injuries on old tight ends is just never a good thing. And the fact that he was dealing with them coming into the season was tough. But the games that he was involved, man, he was a tight end one for us. I'll never forget the 2023 Darren Waller season.
You got to shoot the shot whenever you have the chance to. And I was going to go out on that hill and be like Darren Waller being that guy. But you know what? We couldn't foresee the New York Giants offensive line that was good last season being absolutely terrible this season. We couldn't foresee Daniel Jones missing 3 games. We couldn't see Danny DeVito playing snaps at quarterback. So, I mean, all these different things, you can't forecast them, man. So it's not my fault.
Exactly. Almost done with these injuries, guys. DeAndre Hopkins did not practice today with the toe injury. He's trending towards playing. Ryan Tannehill has been labeled as out due to losing his job to the rookie sensation Will Levis. Washington Commanders, Curtis Samuel, non-practice participant today. And that is it. Woo, that's injury news.
Deep breaths. You made it.
Yeah, that's injury news for heading into week 9. We hope that we help you here pivot if you have any of those players and are looking for someone to fill in. But fellas, let's get into one of my favorite segments of all time, Bussin, Disgussin, and Mid.
Go and try your luck. Touch me in again, we let it rain. Please don't start us up. Got that black and white, that yin and yang. Mr. Officer, please don't search us. We don't.
Oh, that drop is good.
That's a fire drop right there. I love that. I love that. So we're going to get into Bussin', Disgussin', and Mid, and what we're pretty much going to do. We're each going to give you a player in each category. Bussin' is a player that we like outside of the top 20 wide receivers, top 15 running backs, top 8 tight ends, or top 12 QBs. So pretty much a player outside of those positions that we think is going to ball out on the week. Drew had a pretty good week last week in his Bussin', Disgussin', and Mid selections. Discussing players is a player that we don't like inside the top section of wide receivers, inside the top section of running backs, inside the top 12 tight ends, and inside the top section of quarterbacks. So guys that we think that most of the industry is high on, that we don't think is going to have a very good day. And then our mid player is our safe play of the week, our favorite QB 2 to 3, wide receiver 3 to 4, running back 2 to 4, or back end tight end 1 to 3 that we think that you can put into your lineup and not have to worry about. So let's get into it. Drew, hit us with your bussin' player for week 9.
It is so good to have this guy back, man. Diontae Johnson, he picked up right back where he left off with his target earning self after dealing with injuries earlier this year. Had 14 targets last week. And what's even more exciting is the fact he had a 13.4 average depth of target and a career high in air yards. So not only is he getting the targets, he's getting them at a level he hasn't really gotten before. Over the last 2 weeks, he's 11th in air yard share, he's 12th in target share, and he's 10th in first read percentage among pass catchers that have at least 25 routes over the last 2 weeks. And now this week, he gets a Tennessee Titans defense that's giving up the 4th most fantasy points above expectation to the wide receiver position on the season. If the increase in average depth of target and air yards sticks again this week against a big-time plus matchup, Diontae should smash and get you off to a hot start. He's playing on Thursday Night Football. He's playing tomorrow night. So he should get you off to a good start on the week. Fantasy Pros Week 9 ECR has Diontae at wide receiver 28. I've got him up at wide receiver 23, and that's ahead of teammate George Pickens as well. So fire up Diontae. He's back and better than ever.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I love me some Diontae Johnson, one of my most owned wide receivers across all the leagues that I'm in. And if you know how many leagues I'm in, you know I got quite a few shares of Diontae Johnson. Too many shares of Diontae Johnson. So, Rhett, I love the Diontae Johnson pick. Let's keep it rolling with one of my favorite picks of the first 9 weeks that we've been doing this. Fire it off.
Guys, this Bob Harris stuff, it got me feeling saucy tonight. So just go ahead. We go put some good juju out into the air. Pun intended, because my bussin' pick this week is Demario Douglas against the Washington Commanders. Rhett, what are you doing putting up a ECR wide receiver 44 this week? Guys, the path is clearing for Demario in a big way. Last week, he played 41 snaps, ran 27 routes, had 7 targets and a carry, so 8 total touches and 27 possible routes. So not a bad share at all. Last 2 weeks, he's played 62% of snaps and 77% last week, and had a 24.1% target share last week. So that usage is going up, and the New England wide receiving core is going down with Kendrick Bourne tearing that ACL this past week. So, there's a little bit more of a path there than we probably would have ever saw possible heading into the season, except for Chris, who somehow called the Demario Douglas thing ahead of time. So props to you on that, my brother.
C leagues, baby.
And he gets a Washington Commanders defense that if you've been paying attention to the trade deadline, they are in full-on tank mode. I'm sorry, Jorge. They traded Montez Sweat. They traded Chase Young. And to make it all worse with that depleted pass rush, they are giving up 35.9 fantasy points per game and half PPR to wide receivers. That is the worst in the league. So I know it's Mac Jones and I know it's the Patriots defense, but you cannot, the Patriots offense, but you cannot fault this matchup at all. And not to mention that anytime Douglas has had a 50% snap share this season, he's generated at least 6 targets in all of those games. So good sign of usage whenever he's out on the field on a regular basis. So he's starting to get that top wide receiver work a share. He just needs the A dot, which is only 10 yards, which is 63rd in the league right now at this point. But he is averaging 2.19 yards per route run, 2.19 target separation, and a 28.9% target rate against man coverage. So all it takes for him to hit this week on a pretty low projection is 1 touchdown, 5 or 6 receptions, 60 yards, and you have yourself a pretty good week from a guy who, honestly, if you took him at the beginning of the year in your draft or picked him up on waivers early in the season, you weren't expecting that much from him. So no matter what, with him getting this snap share and getting this work, you've already got a winner on your hands. But he's lining up for a big second half with matchups against Washington, Indianapolis, the New York Giants, the Chargers, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then in the playoffs, he gets the Denver Broncos and the Buffalo Bills.
Ooh.
So I get it. The Patriots aren't very good. But this is a flyer that I'm willing to take, and I'm willing to put my neck out for guys to start this week with Demario Douglas. Bussin. Let's go.
Bussin. Let's go. I love it. I love it. So starting off hot. 2 hot wide receivers in Diontae Johnson and Demario Douglas. So you love to see it. Diontae Johnson coming back from injury and Demario Douglas emerging in that New England Patriots offense. I think we got a question in the chat. Let's fire it up and let's get it answered. Let's see it here. Josh asks, rate my 16-man lineup. Burrow, CMC, Alvin Kamara, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, Logan Thomas, Bryce Hall, the Kansas City Chiefs defense, Jake Elliott as my kicker. Anything you think I should look to upgrade?
He's about 7 guys short. He says the 16-man lineup. He only got 9 guys. So I would suggest you pump those numbers up. But I mean, in all seriousness, that's a loaded lineup. I mean, tight ends
just
only one
starters right there, right?
Yeah, right. So I mean, Logan Thomas is the only thing. Like, if you can, I don't know what you have on your bench. I'm assuming that's where the other 7 guys are. But if you can, pair one of those starters along with somebody else to, like, Logan Thomas plus somebody else on your team and go upgrade at tight end. I mean, everything else, you're gravy. Burrow should be solid the rest of the way. CMC and Kamara are solid the rest of the way. Amon-Ra, Jamar Chase, 2 top 12 receivers. Bryce Hall, again, Dalvin Cook looks cooked. So that's what I was curious if he meant, like 16-team league or 16-man roster. Nate, that's a good question. So
yeah,
if he has this team in a 16-team league, would be unreal. So, but either way, 8-team, 10-team, 16-team, that lineup is wild. I would just be looking to see where can I upgrade at tight end. But with the way the rest of your lineup is, you don't really got to overpay to do it. Like, the rest of your roster is good enough to carry Logan Thomas at tight end. So I don't know.
Logan Thomas, no slouch either.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that.
No, not awful. It's just like where else could he possibly upgrade his lineup? Like, maybe a better kicker. I don't know. I don't play in leagues with kickers. So is Jake Elliott a good kicker? I don't know.
Jake Elliott's a good kicker. If it's a 16-team league, the only thing to upgrade would be the level of his league's competition. Just kidding, Josh. That's from Nate. Friend of the show, Nate Markham. And make sure you check out Nate Markham and Jorge Edwards along with Hollywood Titan on Shoot the Gap right after us here on the Fantasy in Frames Network. And if you are watching, make sure you like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to get notified whenever the Fantasy in Frames team drops new content. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hop over to or sorry, if you're watching this on Twitter, make sure you hop over to YouTube because we cannot see the Twitter questions. So hop over to YouTube, drop a question in the chat, and we will get that answered. So let's continue with our Bussin segment. We got Diontae Johnson, we got Demario Douglas, and I'm going to pivot away from the wide receivers and go rookie quarterback Bryce Young of the Carolina Panthers. Bros ECR QB 15, and he's really seen an uptick in his efficiency since Frank Reich handed over the play calling duties for the offense over those last 3 games. Since that change has happened, Bryce Young has finished as a mid QB2 or back end QB1, his highest finish being QB9. He's never really thrown over 200 yards, his highest output 204 with those 3 weeks with Frank Reich as the play caller for the offense. He's averaging 15.2 fantasy points per game through the 3 games. 110 passes, 669 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And if you expand that usage into 5 games, you can see that the efficiency drops immensely within those numbers. So it's that 3-chunk period where the play calling changed from Frank Reich to the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, where you see the uptick in involvement and usage and efficiency, and you see the playbook just really expand for Bryce Young once that change was made. And you see the visual proof of talent versus the Detroit Lions, where he threw for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's averaging 35 pass attempts per game on the season. And over the last 3 weeks, the Carolina Panthers are 11th ranked NFL team in pass attempts per game with 37. This week, they got the Indianapolis Colts. 3 QBs have put up 300 or more yards per game against the Colts. They have allowed 4 QBs to throw 2 touchdown passes against them so far on the season. In the last 3 games, QBs are averaging 247 pass yards against the Colts in those last 3 games. The Colts are the 22nd ranked defense against the quarterback, allowing the 11th most points per week to the position. So quarterbacks against the Indianapolis Colts are pretty much averaging a QB1 finish week in and week out. And we all love a revenge game, and it is revenge game for head coach Frank Reich, who was fired 9 weeks in as the head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. So my projection, 290 yards, 2.5 touchdowns, around 20-ish fantasy points for Bryce Young. So our Bussin picks, Diontae Johnson, Demario Douglas, and Bryce Young. Now let's get into the players we don't think are going to perform too well this week. Drew, lead us off.
All right, so the first one for me, and this doesn't feel good because I called this guy my must-draft player from the Seahawks this year, whatever we were doing our divisional previews, but it's quarterback Geno Smith. He's going up against Baltimore this week. His season hasn't played out the way I thought it would so far through 8 weeks, and unfortunately, I don't think things are going to get much better this week either. Right now, he's the quarterback 22 on the year, and he's already over halfway to his interception total from last season. We're only 8 weeks into the year. He has had at least 2 passing touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, which he had only done once prior to that. But now he's going on the road in a really tough matchup. So the Baltimore Ravens defense, they've given up the 2nd lowest amount of schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the quarterback position, and the 2 bad games by their standards have been on the road. And this week they're at home against Seattle. Now, Geno has looked better the last couple weeks, and he has some matchups later in the schedule that I'm excited about, but having to go into Baltimore and deal with that tough environment, that difficult matchup. Right now, Geno, the Week 9 ECR has Geno at quarterback 13. I've got him down in quarterback 15, so not a huge difference, but in your typical 12-team, 1-quarterback leagues, I think that there are better options for you this week where you should probably pivot off of Geno.
Yep, there you go. Geno is disgusting. Rhett?
Guys, it's time that we get ourselves out of this dream world where we think Tony Pollard has been a must-start fantasy guy. And we're going to call him Disgussin this week, and I'm going to tell you why he enters this week as the ECR running back 13, but he only has one 20-point week this year. thus far. And this is a guy that we were talking about being a top 5, top 4 running back in drafts heading into the season. The stat line is volume heavy, 108 carries, 423 yards, I think 26, 28 receptions, but he's only averaging 3.9 yards per carry this season and 0 touchdowns since week 1. He had 2 in week 1. Since then, he has not found the end zone. And not to mention, he's playing the best fantasy run defense in the league this year in Philadelphia, who averages 12 points below the league average in fantasy points. So the Eagles have not given up over 59 yards to any running back all season. I believe the best number they've given in total was 82 yards and a touchdown to Bryce Hall, and that's total yards for the year. Like we said, Tony Pollard, 2 rushing touchdowns on the year, no receiving touchdowns, playing that style defense. And Dallas seems like they're coming into their own with the pass game after the Dak and CD game last week. Jake Ferguson also having a nice season. The Fantasy Pros projections for Pollard this week is 14 carries, 62 yards. That'd be 13.7 points. But he hasn't hit 13.7 points in 4 of his 7 games this season. So he's underachieving even what are usually very generous projections, and he's done that this year. So, yeah, he's a safe-ish guy in terms of volume. But my question is, at this point of the year, we have 8 weeks worth of data. Do we trust him at this point? Because he doesn't, even if you watch him, he doesn't look like the same guy on the field. So that question is probably going to be answered in these next 2 games after they're friendly. And he does soften in the playoffs playing Buffalo and Miami. So in terms of Tony Pollard, I'm out. But I just have to ask you guys, do you feel the same way about him right now?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't high on Tony Pollard coming into the season as most were. So seeing him struggle is not a real big surprise for me. So I'm not in on him rest of the season. If I can buy low on him, I'm gonna try to do that, maybe just to secure a decent running back. There's no real threat behind him. He's gonna get the usage for the Dallas Cowboys. So if I can get him low, then maybe I'll go buy him low. But he's not someone I'm looking to go acquire.
Yeah,
That's
I mean
fair.
he's as Rhett mentioned, he was a top 4, top 5 running back in draft season. Right now, for me, he'd probably, if I was doing a rest of season type of rankings, he'd probably be in like the 12, 13, 14 range. So I mean, not in the area you were hoping for. Like, I mean, just quick name game real quick. Rest of season, Tony Pollard or Josh Jacobs?
Josh Jacobs.
Pollard.
Tony Pollard or Diontae Swift?
I'm going to go Pollard.
I'll go Swift.
Tony Pollard or Ken Walker?
Pollard.
Walker. I'm out on Pollard. I'm sorry.
There you go. There you go. So and the Pollard owners probably feeling that pain as well. So to Chris's point, if you can buy low, everybody's got a price. No matter how in or out you are on somebody, everybody's got a price. And so
It's true.
I think it's worth exploring, but not a must buy. And as Rhett so eloquently pointed out, maybe you wait one more week because it sounds like it's not going to be a great week for Pollard this week either. So wait until he has another down week this week, like Rhett's going to accurately predict, because that's what's going to happen. Ain't no guess that's what it's going to be. And then go get Pollard.
There you go. And Josh did say 16-team league. 16-team league.
That's
Wow.
a wild lineup for a 16
Sweet lineup for a 16.
I'd probably just, I know I talk about making moves, but having that good of a roster in a 16-team league, I'd probably just kick it as is.
Yeah. All right. Discussing for me, tight end Dalton Schultz, Houston Texans, strictly matchup-based discussing pick for me this week. Fantasy Pros tight end, ECR 8. He's become a touchdown-dependent tight end. In games where he doesn't score a touchdown, he is averaging 2.4 fantasy points per game. This week, fellas, he gets the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if you had to guess how many touchdowns the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have led up to opposing tight ends, what would you guess?
I would guess a low number because I feel like you're setting me up to do so. So I would say 1.
1, Rhett?
Yeah, I did this last week. It's 1 because Kincaid had 1 last week, right?
Kincaid did have 1, yes. But before that, it was 0 touchdowns. Tight ends are averaging 4.8 fantasy points per game, 5 receptions, 48 yards. Yes, Kincaid just lit up the Bucs this past weekend, and the Bucs have let Hawkinson and Dallas Goedert put up some big numbers against them in the offense. But the difference between these tight ends and Dalton Schultz is that these tight ends are heavily involved in the passing game. Dallas Goedert, tight end 1 in slot snaps, tight end 1 in routes run. Dalton Kincaid, tight end 12 in slot snaps. TJ Hawkinson, tight end 3 in routes run. Again, these are the 3 tight ends that put up big numbers against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. These are the tight ends that are heavily involved in the passing game. Dalton Schultz is not heavily involved in the passing game. He is tight end 26 in slot snaps, tight end 21 in routes 1, and tight end 20 in route participation percentage. So that, for me, is the reason why Dalton Schultz is going to be discussing week 9. My projection, 3 catches, 30 yards, and that's me being friendly because I like CJ Stroud. So our discussing picks of the week are Geno Smith for Drew, Tony Pollard for Rhett, and for me, Dalton Schultz, tight end of the Houston Texans. Let's get in to our mid. You got a question?
No, just try to raise my hand like a good student. Also, just another thing to your point of Dalton Schultz not being a great play this week. Dalton shits. If you look at his, if you look at his splits with and without Tank Dell, most of his good games have been without Tank Dell as well, which we'll talk about. Me and Rhett, you're going down in a little bit, Rhett. We're gonna talk about that later. But Tank Dell is back as well. He was back last week. He'll be there this week too. So just another thing against Dalton shits.
We could say he's up Dalton Shit's Creek without a paddle, but that would just be a little too corny for me.
God.
All right, our mid players of the week are players that we think are just safe plays, guys that we just gonna assume or not really assume, project to hit their floor. And Drew's got a hot one off the top, one that kind of hurts me a little bit because I think I'm gonna lose our water bet, even though Cam Akers missed a couple games. But let's hear it, Drew.
He's missed a couple games, was a backup for a few games, but we're back, baby. Cam Akers is back. So Chuba Hubbard, running back for the Carolina Panthers. You talked about Bryce Young and his good matchup. The running backs for Carolina also have a good matchup. The report came out before the game last week that we could expect to see Hubbard to get an uptick in touches. And I don't think any of us could have expected for him to have 67% of the snaps, 17 touches compared to 2 touches from Miles Sanders. And I know Sanders was dealing with an injury of some kind a couple weeks ago, but I mean, they were just coming off their bye. If I'm not mistaken, I think Sanders was a full participant in practice leading up to the week. So I didn't expect that much of a discrepancy in touches. And I don't expect that to continue either. I think the reality is they're paying Miles Sanders too much money, and Hubbard, he honestly wasn't all that impressive with the touches he got. He averaged less than 2 yards a carry on the 15 rushing attempts he got, and he was stuffed multiple times on the goal line as well. But that's why he's a mid play though, right? Like he's not that great of a running back, but if he's going to continue to get volume, if he's going to continue to get starter workload. He goes up against a Colts defense that's giving up the 7th most fantasy points above expectation to the running back position. Consider me interested. So, Fantasy Pros Week 9 ECR has Hubbard at running back 20. I've got him barely ahead of that at running back 18, but I think he's somebody with the volume mixed with the good matchup. Even if the volume does come down a little bit, and if it's more of a split between him and Sanders, I still think with this matchup, he's a good play this week.
Yes, sir. Chuba ranks. You're going to fire him up as your mid player of the week. Rhett, love this one. I live and love this one. I laugh and love this one. Let's hear it. Your mid play of the week for week 9.
Boys, I want you to take a journey with me. I want you to take your inner pumpkin spice. I want you to take your fuzzy boots. I want you to get your yoga pants out. I want you to go to Hobby Lobby, and I want you to get a nice big sign that says "Live, Laugh, Levis." because Will Levis is my mid player of the week, baby. Are we in the upside down? Is Will Levis good? I'm not sure. But you know what? He's good for me right now, and he's playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we're going to have some fun this week. He walks in as the ECR quarterback 18 after being the quarterback 6 in his well-documented debut last week where he threw for 4 touchdowns and 238 yards and going 19 for 29. It was incredible. It was the time of my life. Is a 20% touchdown rate sustainable? Nah, it's not. It's not even. But at a 14.6 fantasy points projection this week, we don't need 4 touchdowns to hit our floor. All we need is for him to do something close to what he did last week. And yeah, I'm going to get it. I understand that DeAndre Hopkins is hobbled this week, practicing, probably going to play, but he may not be the same guy he was last week. That's fine. Pittsburgh secondary won't be the same without Minka Fitzpatrick either. So my boy Will Levis flashed that big time upside, cooked AJ Terrell and that Atlanta defense. Like we said, we're going to go ahead. We're going to fire up our Nora Jones CDs. We're going to have a good time. I'm in on Will Levis, baby. Let's do it.
Live, laugh, Levis, man.
Levis.
This Kentucky boy loves it, man. Let's go, man. Let's get Will Levis some love. I love to hear it. Oh, I love to hear it.
All right, mid-play, Chuba Hubbard, Will Levis. And for me, last week, I gave you guys Jacoby Myers, even went on to call him the condom of wide receivers based on how safe of a play he was. But folks, I'm sorry. Just like I said on Twitter, the condom busted. It busted. He was not good last week. But also, like I said on Twitter, with every busted condom, there's a plan B. And I'm going to do even better than plan B this week. I'm going to give you my abstinence play of the week. And my abstinence wide receiver for week 9 is none other than Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. Yes, he's only got 1 touchdown on the season, but just like abstinence, Michael Thomas does not score. He hasn't scored less than 7 points per game, 100% route participation, wide receiver 2 in routes run, wide receiver 8 in red zone targets, wide receiver 10 in deep targets, considering he's on a team with Chris Olave and Raheed Shaheed. New Orleans in their last 3 games are first in the league in passing yards per game. The boom is coming for Michael Thomas, and the boom, yes, 327 yards per game in their last 3 games.
That is
Number
shocking.
1 team in NFL. Like I said, the boom is coming for the New Orleans offense. The boom is here for the New Orleans offense. 38-0 against the Patriots. Big game last week. This week, they get the Chicago Bears. 30th ranked pass defense, 262 passing yards per game against, allowing the 15th most points to the position on the year. Quite simply put, the Bears are bad at defending the pass. And what does Michael Thomas do? Catches
Run slants.
Pass. Yeah, exactly. He runs slants, which in terms leads to passes caught by Michael Thomas. The Saints should get up on them early. They are in Chicago, so keep an eye on the weather reports. I don't have it in front of me right now, but if I know anything about Chicago, it's most likely going to be windy. My projection, 5 catches, 70 yards, 1 touchdown. Michael Thomas, abstinence wide receiver for week 9. Our mid plays of the week. Drew went with Chuba Hubbard. Rhett, Live, Laugh, Will Levis, and I went with Michael Thomas. That's Bussin, Disgussin, and mid our Bussin players: Drew, Diontae Johnson, Rhett, Demario Douglas. I went with Bryce Young. Our Disgussin players: Drew went with Geno Smith, Rhett, Tony Pollard, and I went with Dalton Schultz. And our mid players of the week: Chuba Hubbard with Drew. Rhett went with Will Levis. And again, I went with Michael Thomas. If you are watching this on Twitter, head over to YouTube, drop a question in the chat. We cannot see any of the questions on Twitter. Anyone watching, please like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell to get notified whenever the Fantasy in Frames team drops new content. Most importantly, stick around after us as the Shoot the Gap IDP show is live at 10 p.m. Boys, let's get into Master Debate. I look over my shoulder thinking I'm going to get whacked or something. I don't know what's going on. So Master Debation, two of the three of us or one of the three of us are going to present a situation to the other two guys. The other two guys are going to debate whether their situation, their side of the situation is better than the other person's side. And then the judge, as well as the viewers, are going to vote on which side is the winning side. Last week I think we all went 1 for 1, right? We're all 1 for 1 around the frames here. This is the week to change it. And we're doing it round 1. Rhett, what's the situation you're bringing up?
All right, guys. So as we've kind of known this year, quarterback has been somewhat of a wasteland. I mean, Jalen Hurts is kind of disappointed. He's put up those rushing upside, but a lot of interceptions. So what I wanted to bring to you guys tonight was just a very simple question. You know, if you had to take a quarterback from the past and import him onto your fantasy team this year, let's say a one quarterback non-super flex, would you take 2019 Lamar Jackson, who is the second highest fantasy scoring quarterback of all time, or 2018 Patrick Mahomes, who is the highest fantasy point scoring quarterback of all time? Alphabetical order as usual. Chris, we're gonna give you the floor first. Who you got?
For me, it's Patrick Mahomes. That 2018 season was special. Recorded 5,097 passing yards, 50 touchdown passes. One of only few quarterbacks to hit 5,000 passing yards and 50 touchdowns. Extraordinary feat. Contributed to his high amount of fantasy points, setting a new benchmark for fantasy QBs. On the other hand, Lamar Jackson's 2019 passing stats were impressive, but not as groundbreaking, with 3,000 passing yards and only 36 touchdown passes. And it's the consistency in the production for Patrick Mahomes that makes the 2019 season better than the 2018 season. Week after week, he recorded 10 games with over 300 passing yards and threw for at least 2 touchdowns in 14 of the 16 games. This consistent production allowed fantasy managers just to plug them into their lineup and forget the QB position even existed. 6 games for Lamar Jackson with over 200 passing yards and 3 games with 5 or more passing touchdowns. The versatility and dual threat abilities, although Lamar Jackson, as we know it, rushing abilities, very impressive. 1,200 yards that year. The passing amount that Patrick Mahomes did that year with the amount of touchdowns, it's just a more significant contribution to fantasy quarterback position. I mean, if we were debating running backs, sure, Lamar Jackson would win, but we're debating quarterbacks, and this is why the Patrick Mahomes 2018 season is more impressive.
Oh, I know you didn't just hit me with not bad for a running back. Now I'm pissed off. All right, look, Rhett. This could arguably be the two best fantasy seasons from a quarterback in NFL history. So I don't envy you for having to make this decision, but I'm going to go ahead and lay out for you why the answer is Lamar. In 2019, on the way to win the MVP, not only did Lamar lead the league in passing touchdowns, not bad for a running back, but he also rushed for 1,200 yards, resulting in the highest fantasy floor for a quarterback in NFL history. Now, how do we know that this is the highest fantasy floor for a quarterback in NFL history? Because he averaged 28.11 fantasy points per game, which is the highest mark for a single season all time. That's right. Patrick Mahomes, all his passing yards, all his passing touchdowns, he still didn't have a better per game number than Lamar. And we know in redraft, this is a weekly game. We're trying to put together wins. We're trying to strain together W's on a week-to-week basis. Nobody had a better weekly game than Lamar in 2019. Now, not only did he give you consistent production during the season, but the icing on the cake, was what he did whenever it mattered most. He was the quarterback 1 overall in week 15 and the quarterback 4 overall in week 16 that year, which won a ton of people fantasy championships. And he did all of this. I'm a late round QB guy. That's been my strategy in redraft and 1 quarterback leagues for years. He did all this after being drafted as the quarterback 14 during the 2019 draft season. He didn't come off the board until after the top 100 picks. So you got to load that roster up and then just icing on the cake again with Lamar Jackson, the league winner. He might not have the flashy passing yards, but guess what? He had the flashy fantasy points, and that's all that I need to win this debate.
So, guys, I'm gonna be quick. I was pretty in on that Mahomes debate, but when he drops fantasy points per game, which is a bread and butter stat, and the playoff stretch, round 1 goes to Drew. Put it on the board.
Come on, said. Okay, I'll give it to you. Both great seasons, though. Both historical fantasy output seasons for the quarterback position. I mean, the amount of rushing that Lamar Jackson, the amount of passing that Patrick Mahomes did in those 2 seasons was epic. Let's get into the next one. We're going to have Drew and Rhett participate in a flex off. So, boys, you cannot flex with your tarps on. So, tarps off for this, all right? We're going to see who's been hitting the gym harder. No, we're going to have Drew and Rhett debate flex player of the week this week. Rhett's going to debate Josh Downs, and Drew's going to tell you why Tank Dell is the better play. We're going to do it alphabetical order, but we're going to do alphabetical order in French, which is backwards. So, Rhett, you go first.
All right. First off, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think Josh Downs is the superior play for the rest of the season. I'm going to go ahead and tell you why. First off, I wasn't big on Josh Downs heading into the season, but he's definitely exceeded those expectations for me. And he has really gotten much better since Gardner Minshew was taken over for Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson was exciting. He's fun to watch. He's got a very bright future. But there's something about the way Gardner Minshew has treated this offense that, Josh Downs has really taken off in these past few weeks. So far this season, he's got a shocking little profile to him. And through 8 weeks, 56 targets and 40 receptions so far this year. Has had 7+ targets in 5 of 8 games so far this year. Looks like, at minimum, the number 2 option in the Indianapolis passing offense, and call me crazy, there are times it kind of looks like the 1B in that passing offense. I'm sorry, but you can't say that about Tank Dell right now in Houston, despite how good he's been at times. The rest of the schedule is up and down, but we know that this week he does have the Carolina Panthers, and as we know, the Carolina Panthers have been fairly friendly to teams this year. So if you're looking for a guy this week, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that Josh Downs is going to be that guy. You have to buy on that. But also, if you're also wondering, I'm just going to throw in a little bonus sprinkle for the rest of the season here. Downs has an outside shot to finish the year with 80 receptions and close to 1,000 yards. And if you could put your money on a guy like that, even on a weekly basis this week, you have to shoot your shot on a guy like Josh Downs. So, Drew, say what you want to say. You're about to tell me, CJ Stroud's the better cornerback. Run the ball. But you know what? Give me Josh Downs or give me death. Famous last words.
Damn.
Look, it's been a pleasure having you, Rhett, but you got to die tonight. And I hate to be the one to do it to you, but somebody's got to do it. Look, apparently Rhett didn't understand the assignment because he tried to fill your brain, Chris, with all these rest of season projections and shit like that. We're talking about week 9, so I'm going to bring the business for week 9 and week 9 only. And this is a fun one because in points per game, they're only separated by 0.2 points. They're 2 young, talented short kings out here doing their thing. They've had similar matchups to start the year. The Colts have had the 12th toughest schedule for receivers. The Texans, the 13th toughest through 8 weeks. So what's the difference between the 2 receivers? As Rhett pointed out for me, thank you for making my point, Rhett. Tank Dell's got the better quarterback of the 2. He also has the better matchup in week 9, which is that's what we're here to talk about. And in this debate, I know we for some reason we went on a rest of season thing. But in week 9, Carolina has been the second toughest matchup for fantasy receivers based on fantasy points above expectation, which is who Josh Downs has to go against. And the Buccaneers have been the 12th easiest matchup based on this same criteria. And just to make things even better, Carolina has also been especially tough against the slot, giving up the 5th lowest percentage of points in that area, the same area that Downs operates in 87% of the time. Now, while Downs averages about 1.5 targets more per game than Tank Dell has a higher yards per target and an air yard share. So he's doing more with less. And so, he might not get the same target numbers, but he's got a better quarterback and he's doing more with what he's got. And not to mention the fact I've got Tank Dell ahead of Josh Downs in my rankings this week. So if you don't pick me, basically you're saying my rankings are shit. So,
well, in that case, I'm picking Rhett. No, both really, really great points there. I'm a big fan of Josh Downs, big fan of Tank Dell. Both made really good points. But week 9, Drew, I was sold on Josh Downs. Just like you did against me, man. You made real good points for Tank Dell. I'm going to give this one to you, man. Well done.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
2-0. Good job.
Yeah. Well done, Drew. Well done, Drew. We sued ourselves to try to make you feel good about yourself, but that it's okay.
It was all that talk about the 2 Saints fans colluding against me last week, right? You guys met off screen and knew you had to do something to correct yourself.
Yeah, exactly. We only got a few minutes left in the show, so we're gonna hop over to Ring the Alarm. Still gets me every time. Ring the Alarm, a segment where we will present a player who had a bad week or weeks previously, and Drew or wet Rhett.
Oh, wow.
3s tonight, baby. We'll be on the side of either ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on said player moving forward. Drew, we're going to start with you. Running back Kenneth Walker, Seattle Seahawks, finally seeing a game where Zach Charbonnet outsnapped him week 8. The season output's been pretty good for Kenneth Walker. He's been putting up some pretty decent numbers, points per game, fantasy points in general. But really, it's the red flag of Zach Charbonnet eating into some of his usage. So are we ringing the alarm on Kenneth Walker, or are we canceling the alert?
I think we need to ring the alarm on this one. It's important to remember that despite not being listed on the final injury report of the week, Walker did come into the weekend dealing with a calf issue. But look, Zach Charbonnet, he played 9 more snaps and ran 11 more routes than Walker. And it was also easily Charbonnet's highest snap percentage of the year as well. He played 59% of snaps. Coming out of college, Zach Charbonnet profiled as a better pass catcher, so it makes sense for him to run more routes as he gets more familiar with the offense, gets deeper into his rookie year. That's a trend I would expect to continue. And I'm not ringing the alarm saying I expect Kenneth Walker to completely lose his job to Charbonnet, but I do think this backfield could end up being much closer to a 50-50 split, which that's not what Kenneth Walker fantasy managers have been used to so far this year. And that goes without mentioning the fact that the Seahawks also have the 4th most difficult strength of schedule for running backs the rest of the way, including matchups with the Eagles and the Titans' tough run defenses in the fantasy playoffs. So less workload, a tough schedule the rest of the way. We should probably be ringing the alarm on Kenneth Walker.
Yep, that's fair. I'm ringing the alarm on Kenneth Walker. I'm not like cranking the horn trying to alert the whole town.
Right.
But, it's starting, man. The missiles are on their way. All right, Rhett. Your players, DK Metcalf, Seattle Seahawks, another Seattle Seahawk. And the reason why I have DK Metcalf in this segment of Ring the Alarm or Cancel the Alert is the emergence and the recent increase in involvement of rookie wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, Rhett, are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on wide receiver DK Metcalf?
I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the Seattle offense before we get into my full answer. Like we mentioned earlier, Geno Smith, quarterback 22 on the season. Kenneth Walker, running back 6 so far this season. Zach Charbonnet emerging. DK Metcalf, wide receiver 45 in total points for the season. Ring the alarm, and here's why. He's averaging 11 points per game this season. Tyler Lockett is right behind him at 10.6. Like we said, Geno not exactly having his best season so far. JSN has had touchdowns each of his past 2 weeks. With the way Seattle's playing the game this year, which it seems to be a little more run reliant than last season, is there going to be enough volume in the passing game to satisfy all these people? Not to mention this Jake Bobo, who's had a couple good weeks so far, who gives them yet another possible option there. It's hard for me to see it. Seems like they want to run and play defense, and now that they're in competition with San Francisco, who's lost 3 in a row, they have a build that they can possibly work with on that. So for me, also, Geno Smith only has 1 quarterback, 1 finish this season. So he's fallen off from compared to last year. That regression is real. It's trickled down to the passing game, and I think it's going to continue to ring the alarm on DK Metcalf.
Not only has Geno Smith written back, he's turned into John Grisham. Rhett Drew, Nico Collins quickly, ring the alarm, cancel the alert with the recent Houston Texans offensive struggles.
Yeah, I'll be damned if you're going to get me to say something bad about Nico Collins. It's not happening. We're canceling the alert. That's our guy. We know this. But in all seriousness, I don't think we should be panicking on Nico just yet. This is still an offense led by a rookie quarterback. Receivers are usually more up and down. It's not an extremely consistent position from a fantasy output standpoint. It's been a month since we got a good game from Nico, but that includes his bye week and then matchups against the 2nd, 10th, and 15th toughest matchup for fantasy receivers. Better days are ahead. Outside of the matchups against the Jets and the Browns, the majority of his schedule is loaded with favorable matchups for fantasy receivers. And then plus, at the end of the day, you're really playing with house money at this point anyway. Nico Collins was being drafted as a wide receiver 57 this offseason. And even with the struggles over the last month, he's a wide receiver 15 on the year. So shout out to us real quick. Shout out to this show, pat on the back. If you listen to us, you would have been all over Nico at that cost. And better days are ahead. Don't worry about it. Things are going to get better.
There you have it. Ring the alarm on Kenneth Walker. Ring the alarm on DK Metcalf. And cancel the alert on Nico Collins. That's it for us at Fourth and Frames. Make sure you stick around for Shoot the Gab with Jorge Edwards, Nate Markham, and Hollywood Titan. For Rhett Manuel at R Manuel Sports. For Drew Scott at Drew3MR. For our amazing producer in the back, Gator J at Fantasy J77. And the rest of the team at Fantasy and Frames. I'm Chris Battistel. Francis Ngannou was robbed. Toodles.